One of the stories that stuck with me was being in a tribe and how they'd use story, dance, and song for how do I navigate through the land to ensure that I don't go into someone else's territory unannounced, or I can find watering holes, or I can find food, what not to eat. No, that's poisonous, or what I should eat. But it was all intertwined with story.
Tom, can I make a suggestion? You're fired!
Welcome to eternity.
Flowers grow low, then they die. Rivers flow low, then run dry.
Heaven.
But a kiss is a kiss for all time. And forever.
Wait a minute. Where am I?
Got milk.
Got Milk, there we have it. That was the original Got Milk creative, and it definitely had an evolution from there. Dr. J.
It was funny. As soon as I started playing this to rewatch it, as soon as I saw the first frame, the whole thing came flooding back to me. That is a sign of a good ad, where the memory print is so deep that all you need is the barest amount of retrieval, and everything comes in and you're like, damn, I even felt young like I used to when I was watching it. I got the feeling. That is such a dang good ad. To be fair, watching it now, I think it could have been 20 seconds shorter, but that's just me. And I think they started making them shorter and shorter and shorter. But this is you want storytelling? Here's how you tell a story. Within less than 5 seconds, they already established an entire character, who he is, and the fact that we all hate him. And that's just in what he says to a phone, how he bumps into an old lady, snickers at a bunch of people, gets hit by a car. In 5 seconds, they established a character better than the entire Twilight saga did in 2 hours. From there, then we're like, what is going to happen? And so what they did, they just take you on a very simple narrative. Oh, turning action. We're now in heaven. Everything's beautiful. Everything's great. Climax. There's the twist. Everything's bad. And this guy actually gets his comeuppance, which makes us as the audience happy. And my gosh, the hero of the story was milk. The one thing that separates heaven from hell is milk. You want someone to like your product? All you got to do is make them think milk is heaven. Congratulations, you win the day. That was just this. There's nothing really to fault at all with that ad.
Look, I agree. The one thing I get nervous about is when brands love prediction break or like humor, or that becomes the hero. Whereas the story was really the hero, but you just constantly going, oh, that's new, that's new, that's new, that's new. And then all of a sudden it was just that twist right at the end. And it was just the punchline. And the clever thing about it is also you look at the overarching principles, the two that we've got for all 12 of the principles. So it's you got to get attention, which they did from the get-go. Yeah. In the first 5 seconds, not only have you established the story, as you mentioned, but, it's like, bang, here is what's going on. I want to find out what's going on. I'm now intrigued. I'm in, what's going to happen next. So you're in the story. So you've got my attention, but it was so simple. Like the narrative, it's not too complex. You follow all the way through, and right at the end, the hero is the product. Not only that, you've got a phrase, got milk, which became part of their branded assets for decades, and people still say it to this day. Yeah. So how do you get a term into someone's vernacular? Keep it simple and punchy. It's like, what's up? You get it into people's vernacular and you anchor your brand to it. But I think even if you rewind and you look at what was the strategy, what were they actually trying to achieve? Very clever. You've got people that have milk in the fridge. I have a cookie or I have something else and I need something to go with it. How do I increase the consumption of milk was the objective. You're anchoring on, if I have a cookie, I need milk. Got milk? No, I don't. Oh, I need more milk. So how do we increase consumption of milk? So you go clever, start to end, genius. They saw huge uplift on the back of this. And, you know, I even like the little touches where the got milk has got the little flames coming up just to prove that. Like, yeah, I just go, I'd say it's one of the best creatives in the last few decades.
And it shows you that human thinking is narrative. All human thinking is narrative, which means the more you can narratize information, the easier it is for people to take it in, to hold on to it. This commercial has a clear narrative. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And because of that, it's real hard to forget the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's just a natural pattern where we go, yeah, oh, that milk commercial. I totally remember what the next step should be. And sure enough, there it was.
So just this, I'm actually going to hijack some of your material from this morning. So there was a study that you were actually summarizing this morning, and correct me if any of my information is wrong or my recall is out. I think there was 3 different components to it. One is just some data or some numbers or some evidence or whatever it was. One was tied to a human narrative or an individual or a story. And one was just a narrative that didn't involve a human. And I think it was like 63% of the sample recalled either of the narratives. And then it was 40% thereabouts where it was just the numbers or just the raw information. So it was quite a difference in the variables. Yeah. And that was tested immediately after. And then I think it was 7 days later, retest. What was the long-term impact of recall? And I think, I can't remember, but I think it was something like 35% with narrative v 20% with no narrative.
And that's just shows you how easy narrative becomes. You do nothing else but wrap information up into a narrative, or use a narrative to frame information, or use a story to introduce information. And all of a sudden we saw, just even from this one simple study, that's a 23% boost immediate retention. And that stays at what, 15%. So both dropped 50% over the next 7 days, which is exactly what you'd expect. Human memory drops pretty rapidly, but it didn't drop any more rapidly. So not only was it good for immediate recall, but it sustained that recall as long as normal memory. And it was nothing more than just adding a little story. Here you go. Here's a narrative. Here's a beginning. Here's a middle. Here's an end. And that's where the information sits.
But that's interesting, because I think where you get your story right is where the brand, and this is more advertising now, if your brand is also the hero of the story.
Yeah.
You know, where, like, I think regardless, you'll still do a better job. But it's interesting, like, that's 50% variance between your control and narrative. And like, one thing about story that really hit home to me, I remember being at Ayers Rock, and we were at dinner, and it was one of those twilight dinners under the stars where you're under there and you had, you know, people talking about Dreamtime and, you know, Indigenous culture. Yeah. And just the way they used to navigate. One of the stories that stuck with me was being in a tribe and how they'd use story, dance, and song to tell narratives about, you know, everything from kangaroos to koalas and everything else in between. But it was all analogies and metaphors for how do I navigate through the land to ensure that I don't go into someone else's territory unannounced, or I can find watering holes, or I can find food, what not to eat. No, that's poisonous, or what I should eat. But it was all intertwined with story. Like, it's not recall, it was story. So you need to go, what's the story? And when you've got the narrative combined with song and dance, like, I'm not sure if you've seen any study with story that's intertwined with song, or especially dance as well. Like, I imagine it's exponentially deeper, the level of memory.
Yep. Especially if you're the one who has to then enact it, it gets even crazier. That's where you start to see memory becomes ridiculously deep. When you're the one who has to tell the story, sing the story, dance the story, watch when you don't have a choice, you remember everything. And it's the enacting. Watching it is good, enacting it is better. And so take that. So this study came out a couple weeks ago. So there's the #1 memory study for memory champions. So this is if you want memory, don't take this like a good memory technique in the real world. This is if you need to memorize a deck of cards, or if you need to memorize where things are. But it's called method of Loci, or method of Loki, excuse me. No, it is Loci. It's the one you don't think it should be. It's Loki. Okay. The method of Loki. And all you do is
watching a Marvel series.
It's, oh man, what is it? And you walk yourself in your head, you build like a palace or a house. So you can take even your own house, and then you just mentally walk through your house, because we all know space very well. And you just put random really strong images in the different rooms of your house. You tie those images to information, and then anytime you need to remember the information, you just take a walk mentally through your house. There you go. That's been the number one memory technique forever. Memory Palace, look it up. 2 weeks ago, they published a paper where they compared that method to an Aboriginal method of memory, which is similar, where you have land in your mind, or a space, but instead of tying really crazy images, you tie a story, you tie a narrative, where the beginning of the story starts at your front door, moves into your kitchen, and the narrative progresses that way. And there was, I think, something like a 20% increase in memory by tying narrative to that technique. Adding narrative, finding a way to, go back to what you were just saying with the Marvel and Loki. There is more information in 10 minutes of a Marvel movie than there is in the entire periodic table. Yet I don't think any human being here listening has ever taken notes during a Marvel movie, or the Avengers are like, I'm going to quiz myself on that. Yet we do all of that for the periodic table. And still, what do you remember more? You remember the narrative, because that ties the information into a way we can easily traverse it. And when I mean narrative, it's not, a lot of advertisers now are confusing that with kind of jokes. So like, I think back to that Jason Momoa ad. People would say that's a narrative. He comes in, he takes off his clothing, and now he's a really thin guy and he watches TV. That's beginning, middle, end. No, that's just a joke. That's not a narrative. There's no character. There's no development. There's no growth. There's no climax. That's a joke. So it's hard to, a lot of people I think are confusing the two. And if you see any really good narrative in an ad, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be a really memorable ad. You're going to go, yeah, that was one of the greatest.
Well, you go 1984 by Apple, like that to a T. Do you know?
Yeah. And they even told the story. They even just were telling you the narrative as they were doing it, and it still works. It's just, what is your story you're trying to get across? And that is the science of advertising.